They speak, yet you hear only the echoes in your own mind. At first, it is easy to think that the noise around you matters more than the quiet inside. Words drift past like leaves on a slow river, but your thoughts gather them up and turn them over again and again. Have you noticed how the mind clings to what it cannot hold, how it pulls at shadows, trying to shape them into something solid, something that will make sense? It begins softly, a comment, a gesture, a look. They pass, and yet they linger. Not because they were heavy in themselves, but because your mind gives them weight. You feel the tug in your chest, the small tightening in your stomach, the restless flutter behind your eyes. You wonder if they meant harm, or if perhaps they did not think at all. And in that wondering, your thoughts grow louder than the world. Why do we chase these things? Why does the mind insist on pulling at every fragment, examining it, twisting it, seeking meaning in the half-light? You could sit for hours, letting each moment pass as it is, yet instead you replay it, shaping it into a story you cannot undo. And still you call it thinking. But it is something else, something restless, something that forgets to breathe. The air feels different when you notice it. It is still heavy with quiet that is often ignored. There is a kind of sadness in it, not loud or bitter, but soft, like a cloud hanging over a field at dusk. You can feel it pressing gently against your mind, reminding you that there is more than words, more than reactions, more than the pull of what others say. It asks nothing of you, only that you notice, only that you sit, only that you breathe. And yet, the mind does not want to rest. It clutches at the edges of the quiet, thinking it can shape it into something useful. Have you felt that? The way the silence itself becomes a question. What if you are missing something? What if this stillness is dangerous, or lazy, or wrong? And so the mind stirs again, spinning small fears into larger ones, creating storms where none exist. But listen closely. There is a difference between noise and thought, between impulse and understanding. Even as the mind spins, even as the chest tightens, there is a place beneath the turning, beneath the clinging, where stillness waits. It is patient. It does not demand you act or reply. It simply exists, quietly, as a reminder that not every sound needs an answer. Not every glance, not every word, not every shadow requires your hand or your voice. Do you hear it sometimes? The faint pulse beneath the restlessness, the calm that slips in for a moment before the mind pulls away? It is like a whisper, almost inaudible, telling you that you can sit with the world and still not be pulled into it. That even as they speak, even as the river of voices moves around you, there is a part of you untouched, quiet, waiting. It is strange how little we trust this quiet. We feel the weight of our own thoughts and mistake it for truth. We worry that silence is empty, when in fact it is full of noticing, full of watching, full of being. The mind has grown accustomed to filling every space with its own patterns, its own fears, its own need to act. But the space itself does not need filling. It waits, patient, gentle, like a room that has always been there, even when we forget to enter it. And so you sit. Perhaps you do not notice immediately the change that begins. Perhaps it is so subtle that you think it is nothing at all. But slowly, almost without your realizing it, the tightness eases. The flutter behind your eyes softens. The restless tug in your chest begins to loosen. You are still aware of the voices around you, still aware of the things that might have pulled you in, but you are no longer caught. You are watching. You are listening. And in the watching, in the listening, the first sense of calm arrives, not loud or bright, but steady and deep. There is a strange power in this quiet if you allow yourself to feel it. It does not shout or demand. It does not push or pull. It simply exists, and in existing it reminds you that there is more to life than reaction, more than explanation, more than chasing after every shadow that passes before you. It reminds you that sometimes the greatest act is nothing at all, save for the act of sitting, of breathing, of being present in the quiet that has always been there. And so as you sit, letting the whispers of the world pass through without clinging, you begin to understand. The echo of your own mind is not your enemy. It is simply a mirror, reflecting what you have learned to carry too heavily. And in that understanding, the first gentle seed of peace begins to grow, soft, quiet, waiting for the next moment, the next breath, the next chance to simply be. Every impulse to respond carries a weight, though at first it is barely noticed. It is not the words themselves, nor the glance, nor the touch. It is the urge within you to act, to shape what is past, to make it right, to explain, to defend. Have you felt that? The quiet pull in your chest, the subtle stirring in your mind, telling you that something must be done, someone must understand, something must change. It is strange how easily we confuse movement with meaning, how we think that action will soothe the restless mind, when often it only adds another layer to the noise we carry. Each time they speak, each time a shadow of disagreement passes by, there is a choice, though it feels like there is not. You can react, letting the words spill out like water over a cliff, or you can pause, and in the pause, feel the weight settle. The weight is gentle yet persistent. It sits behind your eyes, in the hollow of your chest, in the quiet corners of your stomach. You notice it when you try to speak, when you hold back, when you wonder if silence will be taken for weakness. And still, the pause remains. It does not rush. It does not demand. It only waits, asking quietly whether you wish to carry this weight outward or let it rest within. It is uncomfortable, this waiting. The mind does not like it. It stirs restlessly, imagining all the possible outcomes, rehearsing the words it might have spoken, the actions it might have taken. And in that stirring, the chest tightens, the breath quickens, the body leans forward, ready to act, yet something holds you back. Something soft, yet firm, reminds you that not every storm requires a sail, not every fire requires fuel. Sometimes the fire burns itself out if you simply allow it to be. Have you noticed how much of life is spent in these small, invisible struggles? How often we measure our strength by how quickly we respond, by how loudly we defend, by how skillfully we explain. And yet, there is a different kind of strength, one that does not show itself in action or speech. It shows itself in the calm that remains after the urge has passed, in the quiet space that grows when you do not feed the impulse to react. There is a strange clarity in sitting with this weight. You begin to see the patterns that always return, the stirrings, the unrest, the need to make sense of what has passed. You notice how much of this is not about them at all, but about the mind that cannot rest, the heart that cannot let go, the pride that wishes to be seen. And in noticing, the heaviness begins to shift. It does not disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes a gentle reminder of your own capacity to pause, to breathe, to choose. And yet, even with this understanding, the discomfort does not vanish. There is still a tension, a subtle unease that asks, what if silence is misunderstood? What if restraint is taken for weakness? The mind imagines the judgments, the missed opportunities, the things that might have been said, the explanations that might have changed a moment forever. And still the quiet persists, soft as a shadow, urging nothing, showing nothing, only existing. You begin to notice the difference between action born of impulse and action born of choice. One leaves ripples, stirring the water in ways that cannot always be calmed. The other is like dropping a stone in a deep pond and letting it sink slowly to the bottom, its presence known, but its disturbance contained. It takes patience to learn this, patience to feel the weight without flinching, patience to watch the mind spin and not follow its every twist. The chest tightens once more, and You feel the familiar pull, but now it is different. You see it clearly. You feel it without fear. You do not need to chase it, to respond to it, to set it free. It is enough to simply be present, to allow the weight to exist without letting it dictate your next breath. The impulse is there, yes, but so is a stillness deeper than the urge, a quiet strength beneath the trembling. And in that stillness, something begins to settle. The mind slows its turning. The chest releases its tension in tiny increments, almost unnoticed. You begin to understand that the power of restraint is not in holding back alone, but in holding oneself, intending to the inner world before it spills outward. There is a subtle dignity here, a quiet respect for what you carry and for what you do not. It is not loud or flashy. There are no grand proclamations, no sudden triumphs. There is only the gentle sense that, in choosing silence over reaction, in feeling the weight without rushing to release it, you have discovered a small, steady power, and it grows quietly, like a river beneath the ice, unseen yet undeniable, patient and enduring, waiting to carry you forward when the world moves around you while you remain unshaken within. When they misunderstand, it can feel as though the world has shifted beneath your feet. You speak, you act, you carry yourself with care, and yet the meaning you hope to share does not reach their eyes, their ears, their hearts. Have you felt that quiet ache before? The subtle loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from being unseen, misread, or misjudged. It settles softly at first like a shadow across a familiar room and then lingers, pressing gently against your chest. It is easy to let this misunderstanding become a story in your mind, to tell yourself that they are wrong, that they have failed to notice, that they have failed to appreciate. And yet, even in that story, there is a choice. You can follow the mind into its swirling explanations, its quiet resentments, its imagined corrections, or you can step back, breathe, and feel the stillness beneath the pulse of unrest. There is a strange comfort in watching yourself through the lens of silence. The heart feels its own rhythm, steady and true, while the mind imagines the world in its many possible ways. You notice how often we seek approval, recognition, or understanding from places that cannot give it. How often we bend ourselves, twist ourselves, or rush to clarify, believing that without action, the world will turn against us. And yet sometimes the world does not need our shaping. Sometimes it moves as it will, and we are invited simply to watch, simply to remain. In these moments, when misunderstanding hangs between you and them, the first stirrings of quiet strength appear. It is not loud or forceful. It does not demand that you be seen or understood. It is a gentle recognition that you are whole, even when others cannot see the shape of your truth. Have you noticed how light it feels, this release? How small the tension in the chest becomes when you stop reaching for their eyes and return your gaze inward, and still the mind is restless. It whispers reminders, tiny and persistent. What if they continue to misread you? What if they speak of you wrongly? What if silence becomes weakness in their eyes? You may feel the pull, the old desire to explain, to just iffy, to convince. But the quiet strength has learned to breathe alongside this restlessness, to acknowledge it without surrendering to it. It watches the urge, and in watching, it begins to dissolve. You begin to see that their misunderstanding does not diminish you. It does not alter the value of your thought, the depth of your feeling, or the quiet dignity of your presence. And in this seeing, you discover a subtle kind of freedom. You are no longer dependent on their recognition, their comprehension, or their agreement. You carry your own understanding within, delicate, firm, unwavering, like a small flame in the center of a darkened room. It is gentle work, this building of inner strength. There is no sudden revelation, no thunderous moment of clarity. It comes softly in the small acts of letting go, of holding yourself with care, of choosing not to respond to every echo. You feel the weight of the world lessen, not because the world has changed, but because you have shifted within it. The same voices may speak, the same glances may pass, and yet you are no longer pulled as before. And the calm that grows is not empty, it is rich with observation. You notice how often misunderstanding arises from expectation, from habit, from the mind's own patterns. You notice how easily people assign meaning even where none exists, how they project their own fears and desires onto the shapes they see. And you notice, most importantly, that you are not bound by these projections. You are free to remain quiet, to remain still, to remain present without apology. Have you felt the subtle pride that comes from restraint? Not the pride of being seen, but the quiet satisfaction of holding yourself, of honoring the space within that no one can take from you. It is a power born of patience, of observation, of understanding that silence can speak in ways words never can. And it is here, in the midst of misunderstanding, that the heart begins to expand, not outward toward them, but inward toward itself. There is a rhythm to this growth, slow and steady, like water carving stone over countless years. Each pause, each breath, each refusal to react adds to the quiet foundation beneath your being. You begin to understand that true strength is not always in the voice, not always in the hand, not always in the action. Sometimes it is in the stillness that remains when all else moves. Sometimes it is in the gentle confidence that you are enough, even when they do not see it, even when they do not understand. And as the moments pass, as the quiet settles like dusk over a field, you feel a soft dignity growing within. It is a presence that does not demand notice, that does not seek applause, that does not require explanation. It is simply there, firm, gentle, resilient, and it holds you through the misunderstandings, the misread glances, the silent judgments. You have discovered that the deepest strength is not shown to the world, but carried quietly within. Like a river running beneath ice, unseen yet powerful, steady and enduring, shaping the landscape of your inner life without haste, without force, simply by being. At last, there is a gentle settling, a soft quiet that rests over the chest like a slow evening tide. The restlessness has softened, the impulse to chase or explain has loosened its grip, and you find yourself in a space that feels both familiar and new. It is a room within yourself, invisible to others, yet entirely your own. Have you noticed how rare this feeling is? How seldom the mind allows itself to simply rest without expectation, without need, without judgment? Here, in this quiet, you can feel the rhythm of your own breathing. Each inhalation and exhalation carries a kind of peace that is deeper than thought. It is a knowing, not loud or sudden, but steady, like a river that moves beneath the earth, unseen, unstoppable, enduring. You notice the small rise and fall of the chest, the warmth in the hands, the gentle hum of your own presence. And you realize that this too is a kind of strength, soft, resilient, self-contained. In the past, the mind would have rushed to fill this room with worry, with plans, with explanations. It would have questioned the silence, judged the stillness, searched for meaning in every shadow. But now, you feel a shift. The mind watches rather than acts. It notes the passing thoughts, the fleeting anxieties, the gentle stirrings of doubt, and allows them to pass like clouds across a wide, open sky. There is no need to hold them, to chase them, to unravel them. They come and they go, and you remain steady, quietly present, calmly whole. It is remarkable how small gestures of restraint can grow into such deep calm, how the simple act of not reacting, of choosing to observe rather than respond, of letting words and glances pass without feeding them into the mind's endless machinery, can create a space so full of quiet strength. Here, there is no fear of being misunderstood, no need to convince, no pressure to perform. There is only the room you have made within yourself, and the steady comfort of being entirely there. Have you noticed how the heart begins to feel lighter in this space? The tightness that once lingered in the chest softens into something like warmth. The restless flutter behind the eyes quiets, leaving a calm awareness that stretches from the mind down into the hands and feet. You begin to sense your own rhythm, a pulse that is yours alone, independent of what others see, independent of what others say. And in that rhythm, there is a small but profound joy, the kind that does not need applause or recognition, only acknowledgement from the self. You notice, too, how the world around you has not changed. The voices, the glances, the misunderstandings, they still exist. Yet they touch you differently now. They are no longer storms to be weathered, nor fires to be extinguished, nor weights to carry. They pass through the quiet room within, acknowledged but not owned, observed but not acted upon. And in this gentle separation there is freedom, a freedom that does not shout or declare, but simply exists as a calm, unshakable presence. It is in this presence that you begin to see the subtle power of self-respect. Not the kind that is loud or demanding, but the quiet respect of holding your own inner life intact, of allowing yourself to remain whole without bending to the judgments or expectations of others. This is dignity without need of validation, strength without struggle, peace without retreat. You begin to understand that it is not the world that must recognize your value, but the self that must honor it quietly, consistently, tenderly. The mind may wander as it always does. It may flicker back to what they said, what they did, what they might yet say. And still, you do not follow it. You watch the thoughts drift past like leaves floating on a calm pond. The tension in the chest does not return. The flutter behind the eyes does not rise. You simply remain, quietly aware, steady in your own rhythm, calm in your own space. And in this calm, you begin to feel a deep trust. A trust, not in circumstances, not in others, not in outcomes, but in the inner life that you have cultivated. You realize that no misunderstanding, no impulse, no noise can reach this quiet room unless you invite it. You have discovered that true peace is not found in silence alone, but in the deliberate choice to carry yourself with patience, with observation, with care. So you sit, you breathe, you listen to the gentle rhythm of your own being. There is no urgency here, no need for words, no pressure for action, only the calm assurance of a space that is entirely yours, filled with quiet strength, quiet dignity, and quiet joy. It is a soft, unshakable power rooted in patience, observation, and self-respect. And as you remain in this quiet, you realize something remarkable. You are home within yourself, and that is enough.